Welcome to a Noob's Guide to
Malakai Makaiison!
This is Malakai Makaiison, a dwarf engineer turned slayer who has more than one screw loose and has sworn to seek an honorable death but is unwilling to go to it without first making sure it will count for something. Because when you're a dwarf who can MacGyver his enemies to death with a half bar of soap and an old woolen sock, charging face first into a troll's mouth isn't brave, it's just wasteful. Malakai and his dwarf pals are part of the Thrones of Decay DLC. In this video, we'll go over Malakai's lore and how that's been translated to gameplay in Total War Warhammer 3. Normally, a Noob's Guide requires paging through obscure texts to create a personality for a character from a few disjointed lore bits, but Malakai is part of Warhammer Fantasy's most popular book series, Gotrek and Felix, with 17 books about their adventures. Malakai isn't in all of them, but he steals the show whenever he is, and then promptly blows it up, chewing scenery so hard he's picking it out of his teeth. Malakai's deranged engineering mantra is simple. If it goes fast, it can go faster. And if it goes boom, well by Grungni, there's a way to kill everyone who ever wronged a dwarf with it. Unfortunately, the Dwarf Engineers Guild, the governing body of dwarfish invention, wants all their submissions to have perfect blueprints, smooth lines, itemized budgets, and be surprisingly easy to masturbate to. As per their guild motto, Sic Instruis, Venient.
Oh baby, I wonder if that's the skill.
Initially, Malakai stuck to the script with the guild, creating the rotating triple-barreled repeater he uses in-game, but it lacked punch, so he devised some deranged munitions for it to fire, inscribing runes onto bullets made from depleted gromril so anyone firing them can magically hit harder. With their increased range, he needed to see further, so he thought why not invent a pair of scope goggles? And how about a special rocket-powered spanner to use on any stuck bolts that needed persuading? And if you can attach a rocket to a wrench, you can attach a rocket to a mining satchel stuffed full of explosives and a box of nails. And to his credit, the Cinder Blast cluster bomb was so effective on its first trial that it gave the Slayer King, Ungrim Iron Fist, permanent tinnitus. Which gave him a thought. What if you strapped all those inventions onto a mobile aerial platform? You could rain death onto anyone, anywhere. So Malakai built the airship equivalent of a hot rod by enlarging its balloon, doubling its cannons, and goosing the engines. It looked ugly as sin, but it was the fastest hunk of junk in the galaxy. When it worked. That last bit was the sticking point. Malakai's first dwarf thunder barge, the Indestructible, catastrophically exploded shortly after launch, while his ironclad ship, the Unsinkable, promptly sank on its maiden voyage. Even worse, Malakai was from a northern dwarf hold and spoke with a suspiciously Scottish accent that rubbed many the wrong way.
Bonjour, you cheese-eating surrender monkeys!
So when Malakai started arguing about the need to invent more malt-forward beers like the northern dwarfs liked, it was the excuse the dwarf guilds needed to ride Malakai out on a rail. A string of increasingly unhinged mechanical creations was bad enough, but they weren't about to let him touch their beer. Malakai was pressured to take the Slayer's Oath and be exiled from dwarf society, a social atonement that is taken on for kinslaying, cowardice, and, I kid you not, being unable to grow a decent beard. But Malakai was raised to be a good dwarf, so he shaved his head into a mohawk, bleached it orange, and then visited the nearest kitchen for some hair gel.
Lunch, Lady Doris. Have you got any grease?
Yes we do.
Then grease me up, woman!
With newly punked and pointed hair, Malakai swore the Slayer's Oath, to seek redemption in the eyes of his ancestors by seeking their enemies until his death, as only that would forgive his shame. But before throwing himself at the nearest troll, Malakai had a point to prove, and went full mad scientist to hand-build a new Super Thunder Barge 2.0, the Spirit of Grungni. This technological beauty straps a long ship to a balloon, rocket boosters to the side, then adds cannons and an ale hall serving only the best malted brews, letting Malakai bring his northern dwarf culture to the world and then rain it down onto them. This home away from home lets you play Malakai like a dwarf horde faction. Everything you'll need for a successful campaign can be built on his ship. Slayers, drawn to this striking monument of assured death, can be recruited from the main building line, with additional slots adding engineering bays for onboard recruitment. You can still occupy and expand the regular dwarf holds to unlock the full dwarf roster, but you'll be spending most of your campaign higher than Cheech Marin on a 747. In battle, the Spirit of Grungni can be called in to provide aerial superiority and bombard anyone caught under it. Malakai is even able to extend how long it can stay up and in battle before it has to rest and reload with little blue plane pills, which are available through his skills and unique quests. This Thunder Barge is what brought Malakai to the attention of Gotrek and Felix in the books. These renowned heroes joined up for a Slayer expedition using Malakai's airship to set out to reach the lost northern dwarf hold of Karak Doom. Formerly, Karak Quite Nice actually, until their advertising team renamed it to attract the untapped Slayer vacations market. After evacuating the dwarf hold via airship, Malakai, Gotrek, and Felix flew around the world and fought dragons, greenskin hordes, enemies that don't actually exist, and upstart chaos armies. Coming out on top every time thanks to the timely arrival of Malakai and his quite literal Deus Ex Machina. These escapades are what inspired Malakai's Adventures, a mechanic that lets you choose a Gotrek and Felix book, Skaven Slayer, Elf Slayer, Beast Slayer, then complete thematically inspired objectives before fighting a final quest battle in each chapter. Finishing Adventures then unlocks unique items and upgrades for Malakai's dwarf machines. Thanks to their time together, Gotrek and Felix begin campaigns aboard the Spirit of Grungni, giving you turn 1 access to a dwarf who is so busy fighting demons he forgot to die during the end times, and his blonde buddy. Unlike other campaigns in Warhammer 3, Gotrek and Felix won't wander away after a set timer, though Gotrek will berate Malakai for not having properly sought out a Slayer death yet, like a boomer dad at the dinner table asking why you haven't had kids. Malakai Makaiison finds himself stuck in a Slayer limbo, where he's far more useful alive. He won't run away from death, he just doesn't blindly pursue it either, because it turns out his unique talent for creating insane murder machines is highly prized across the globe. On the battlefield, Malakai is effective at range, and more dangerous than you'd expect in close quarters. His main role, though, is as a support hero, buffing the damage of nearby Slayers and war machines, including speedy reloads mid-battle. As a Slayer and an engineer, Malakai brings the best of both worlds to this DLC, and while the Spirit of Grungni is his baby, Malakai also brings thunder barges to the rosters of the unwashed, ungrateful dwarf masses. These flying fortresses have bomb racks, cannons, and grudge rakers mounted on the rails. They also sport oak paneling, brass fixtures, and a full beer hall to keep everyone aboard at the level of inebriation required to consider flying such a dangerous contraption in the first place. It's often overlooked that the Slayer Oath is a tiered process, with each step getting a bit tougher. Beginners fight trolls, and if they manage to kill one, advance to giants, then dragons, and finally demons. Few make it to that final step, and anyone that does is barely sane and exceedingly dangerous. From this, we get Demon Slayers as the new generic Slayer Lord for dwarfs in this DLC, while Dragon Slayers are the generic heroes. Both are melee specialists who deal high damage and have the Worthy Foe ability, which increases melee stats when near something that inflicts terror in the world of Warhammer, which most often is talking to girls, wearing deodorant, and a short story about a female custodes. The Demon Slayer Lord's stat line buffs nearby Slayers, even making them unkillable for a short time with the ability A Glorious Death, while the lesser Dragon Slayer hero adds an extra layer of specialization by being better at felling large entities, like, dragons, and your mom. For new units, Malakai can recruit Doom Seekers, who take the Slayer Oath a bit more seriously, working themselves into a depressive rage before running at enemies with whirling axes on long chains like Kratos in God of War. They then spin around in a vortex of bearded death, gaining defensive bonuses for each person they kill. Doomseekers are cool and all, but frankly, Malakai feels this is an outdated way of doing things. He could just put some axes on a conveyor belt, slap a crank on the side, and automate the whole process. The Goblin Huber chucks a flurry of axes to cut down targets, trees, and trolls alike. And as an added bonus, when it runs out of ammo, the slayers manning it run into battle to do that thing they do. Thankfully, the Goblin Hewer has a short range, so they don't have to run very far after. Malakai's view on maybe not running to your death and instead finding a way to better serve dwarf kind is shared by the Slayer Pirates, who have all the benefits of being slayers with the added pros of guns and parrots. And if that still isn't enough boomstick for you, Malakai begrudgingly admits that there's one invention he wishes he'd dreamed up first. Grudge Rakers. 12-gauge double-barreled Remington shotguns, Dwarf Guild, top of the line. These sweet babies were made by Master Engineer Grim Burlockson and retail for around 850 gold in-game. Put it all together, and Malakai offers you a flying super gunship that can airdrop hairy short kings anywhere on the planet, then support their suicidal murder escapades with heavy artillery and air support. It's a high-damage, mobile, mechanized playstyle that encourages an aggressive offense not normally associated with the dug-in-like-a-tick dwarfs. All thanks to this magnificent nutter, Malakai Makaiison, the engineer turned slayer. So I hope you like your weapons hot-loaded, your hair spiked, and your meat boiled in a wee sheepy's stomach. Because this has been a Noob's Guide to Malakai Makaiison.